yeah, what was it, a week ago or so?
Yeah. Like, yeah,
Maybe two. I don't know.
like 12 days. Yeah. Um,
So I just run over to PowerPoint and I'm
You
not,
share your screen.
yeah.
You see how to, you know how to do this,
Oh,
right?
I
Or
see
do
at the
you?
bottom.
And then
Okay.
there's another one once you pick the right one.
What?
Once you pick the right screen or application, then you have to hit share again.
Okay, so if I hit share now and then run over to PowerPoint or
You
no?
can do that. You can share your screen and then
Okay.
don't share the application, share the screen.
Okay. So let's share the screen, run over to PowerPoint, slideshow from the beginning. Does
And
that work?
I'm not seeing it yet. Did you hit share and then after that you pick your screen, like screen one or screen two, and then you hit share and a little blue button at the bottom of the screen?
No. Let me go back over to, okay. Zoom, I said share. Oh, the little blue button that says share.
They make you do it twice.
Okay. This is why I married a computer guy, Olivia.
Oh, well, we all marry for different reasons. I'm glad you found a good one.
Exactly. So if I share that, there we go.
You're good.
There we
Take it,
go.
put it in presentation mode and take it away.
Yep. From the beginning. Yes. It worked, it worked, it worked. We're a nice, we're a small, very intimate group this evening. I figure I started with this. I put this photo on the cover because this is Apothecary's Rose, and it is really one of the most ancient roses that we have that are still in commerce. And it is fabulous and fragrant and takes over the world with suckers, but that also means that you have enough to share. So here, rose people already know this. Old Garden Rose belongs to a class that was existed prior to 1867, the year that La France was introduced. The American Rose Society decided that in 1966 to put the dividing line between old garden roses and modern roses. I divided this into three logical categories of old garden roses. The European roses, which are mostly the wonderful, colorful spring blooming varieties. Asian roses, which are the many varieties of China and tea roses that came to the Western world in the late 18th century, and classes of hybrids between these two groups. We're going to talk about these classes of the old European OGRs, the Gallicas, the Damasks, the Alba, Centifolia, and the Moss. Gallicas are documented to have existed in Europe as early as the 12th century. They are certainly earlier than this. We just don't have any written documentation of the fact. A true Gallica is a small plant, often less than 4 feet tall, spreads via suckers, can form dense colonies if left to grow unchecked. Gallicas bloom in the spring. They're highly fragrant. Flowers are mostly in shades that were not seen in other classes like magenta and purple and burgundy, sometimes solid, sometimes shaded or striped. They have matte foliage and stems are often very prickly. I can't smell many roses, but one of the fragrances that I do enjoy a lot is the myrrh fragrance that people describe in David Austin roses. And this is where it came from because David Austin crossed Belle Isis with a Floribunda dainty maid and created Constant Spry in 1960. Elegant Gallica is the name that was given to this rose by Leonie Bell, who was an illustrator and a rose historian and a rose hunter who lived in Northeast PA. She discovered this in the garden at Wick in Germantown near Philadelphia. And the big thing about the Wick garden is it is intact. It was overgrown, but they were able to recover it with many of the original plants that were there in the 19th century. Flowers on La Belle Sultane are shaded magenta and violet with that bright yellow shock of stamens, and it's a sight to behold in the garden. I tell people that I love singles and semi-doubles. You show me your stamens and I'll love you forever. If you have this rose, it'll sucker adequately enough for you to share with a lot of your garden friends. It's about 3 feet tall, dark stems, and the characteristic matte gallica foliage. Incredibly fragrant. Smells just exactly like you expect a rose to smell. Tuscany Superb has deep burgundy flowers. Incredibly difficult to photograph because the red and the green in a digital processing fights you. Has matte foliage and prickly stems, just like the rest of its Gallica cousins. It grows less than 5 feet high. It's about knee high for me, and it thrives with very little care in my back garden. I tend to grub out some just about every year when they grow out of bounds. Now we get to damask roses. Damask is a race of hybrids that probably originated in the foothills of Central Asia and Iran. I have a program that I do called Roses Are Herbs Too, and it concentrates heavily on the damask roses because these are still grown for their apothecary and fragrance uses. The name damask refers to Damascus, Syria. Crusaders in the siege of Damascus during the Second Crusade in the 1140s are credited with bringing the damask roses to Europe. For centuries, damask roses have been an important agricultural crop in Iran, Turkey, and formerly in Afghanistan, which it's been eclipsed by opium in Afghanistan. And as a source for rose essential oil and rose water, most commercially available rose products today are derived from damask roses. Here we have autumn damask. It's one of the few members of this class that reblooms. DNA comparison shows that this is a hybrid of Rosa muscata times Rosa gallica with Rosa fedchenkowana, which took me forever to learn to pronounce. It has a normal flush of flowers in the spring, and it'll often produce a few flowers in the fall. The rose that we know as belladonna existed around the world, called by different names after its true name disappeared from records in the early 20th century. In the early 19th century, Leonie Bell, again, took on the challenge of identifying this wonderful rose, and she scoured historic articles and catalogs to do so. She was really good at comparing descriptions of roses with ones that she had discovered and was often quite successful at identifying them. Sometimes she was definitely off base, but with this one we think that she hit the proverbial home run. Celsiana, look how graceful that is. It was developed in the Netherlands and first introduced in France. It's a tall, upright shrub and often reaches 6 feet in height. Ispahan is one of the most popular and well-loved damask roses. It's probably one of the most readily available ones also. Even die-hard modern rose enthusiasts often make room for Ispahan because it is that good. Tall, vase-shaped, self-supporting, fragrant, disease-resistant. It's the whole package. Now here we have my favorite damask. This is Leda. It's shorter than most of the others. In its growth habit, it actually behaves like a gallica. So it's short and it tends to sucker, but that really means that you just can share it with all your friends. Those deep pink buds, the one you see on the left there, open to reveal crystal white flowers with the violet shading around the outer edges. It's easy to understand why Leda is also known as the painted damask. Albas. Alba roses are believed to have originated from a natural hybrid of a damask rose and Rosa canina. They're among the roses grown by Romans for medicinal purposes. In the garden, albas are tall and upright and can be trained to grow to structures like climbers. They're unique for their matte blue-green foliage, and their flowers are pale pink or white. These are ones that you can identify even if they're not in bloom, just because of the texture and the color of the foliage. Albas bloom only in spring. They are exceptionally winter hardy, and they are also exceptionally difficult to root from cuttings. I have never been successful in trying to root an alba from cuttings. Here we have Celestial. This was actually one of the very first old garden roses that I bought from Sharando Roses that used to be near Waynesboro, in Western Virginia. It's also known as, you'll also see it listed as Celeste. I was taken by this rose's upright form, clear pink flowers, and matte foliage. I still have this plant, and I always look forward to seeing it bloom every spring. Many rose growers are familiar with Madame Plantier. It's one of those roses that has been shifted from class to class to class in the ARS because it doesn't seem to fit firmly into any one class. Currently, they have it landing among the albas. It grows in a perfect arching heap with very few prickles. The fat pink buds, you can see the pink in that bud, open to clear white plants or clear white flowers. This, I have been told by some of my California rose scholars that this was used for a period of time as a rootstock, and that would explain why I have been known from time to time to find it in cemeteries. The one that still exists that I found is at the Warrenton Cemetery in Warrenton, Virginia, and it's incredibly happy there, existing without any water or any care. Here we have Alba Maxima, an incredibly difficult rose to photograph because we were talking about thrips earlier. Thrips love it, and it doesn't really particularly care for damp weather, so it will ball and kind of brown around the edges. My first encounter with Alba Maxima was when I met the plant that grew on Sally Doswell's grave in Section K at Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond. It thrived in a semi-shady location, growing cane on cane, and it was more than 10 feet tall. I have a plant in my garden that came from that cemetery plant because I saw a small sucker that had emerged from its base. I carefully dug it and babied it until it was established. It's a good thing that I grew it from that sucker because the original plant at the cemetery died and there's no trace of it now. Centifolias. Centifolia originated in the Netherlands. It was named for the fact that some varieties of centifolias truly do have 100 petals or more. They bloom in the spring. They're very fragrant. They're exceptionally cold hardy. Centifolias can be large shrubs or dwarf varieties, and it's a relatively small class. Here we have Centifolia major. As its name suggests, the flowers are large, the plants are large. It is upright, very, very, very fragrant. Here we have Centifolia variegata. You'll also find it going by the name village maid or cottage name or a whole host of unpronounceable French names. Whatever you call it, the flowers are striking and fragrant, and the plant itself sprawls, and it is a great candidate for pegging if you have the space. Fantin Latour is a centifolia that most of us rose people have seen. The date is late for a centifolia, discovered in England sometime before 1838 and introduced to commerce in 1945. It's a tall plant that produces these beautiful fake pink flowers with a button eye. Very, very fragrant. Tour de Malakoff. It was formerly classed as a hybrid perpetual, but it was moved to the centifolias where it's a better fit. My guess is that they probably did this based on the flower form, but it is a once bloomer only in the spring, and it does fit better in with the centifolias. In a sunny location, the petals have this amazing range of color shading that you see in this photo. I have a particular affection for the miniature centifolias. I have two of them. I have Rose de Meaux, and then there's this one, Pom Pom de Bourgogne, which was the first one that I bought. It is a tiny little thing. It's about 2 feet tall, and everything about it is a perfect miniature centifolia. The foliage is also tiny and matte, and once it's established, it will sucker and spread, which will give you plants to share to your friends who admire it. Moss roses are freaks, and I love them. They emerged as sports from the centifolias. That mossy growth on the buds is sticky, and it often smells like pine sol. They're once blooming and repeat blooming varieties. Ralph Moore, who's known as the king of miniature roses in the United States, worked with moss roses and developed a line of reblooming miniature moss roses. Here we have Henri Martin. The flowers on this rose are rather unremarkable, but I had to show you this photo because it so perfectly illustrates the moss on the buds of these moss roses. This is also known as old red moss. You'll see it both ways. It is one of the more familiar moss roses today. It blooms profusely in the spring in sprays like you see there. It'll also sucker to the ends of the earth, which is why I removed mine and I gave it away to somebody who admired it. Don't let this scare you. We all know that one person's garden thug is another person's darling. Crested moss is also known as Chapeau de Napoleon, and it has the most amazing buds. Look at the fringy moss on the edge of those sepals. This rose is a great novelty for gardens. Salé is one of the moss roses that repeats modestly after its first spring flush. For me, Salé takes a summer vacation and then gives me a few flowers in the fall. It's a rather angular plant, so I have to groom it to kind of keep it looking nice. And here we have white bath. Look at that moss. It's also sold as Shaler's white moss, but I can't believe that idea is correct. It's a really well-behaved plant in the garden. The pink buds open up to reveal clear white flowers, and it's very, very fragrant. Now we get to the Asian old garden roses. Now put yourself into the late 18th century when the China trade opened up, and some of the things that they were bringing back were plants, and they brought roses that bloomed all the time, almost nonstop from spring to frost, when most of the Europeans had roses that only bloomed in the spring. And what's great about for us is they thrive in hot, humid weather. China's come in all sizes, from tiny dwarf plants to large climbers, and I can't be objective about China's because I love them. Old Blush is one of the only original imports whose identity is known for certain. These were known as the four stud Chinas, and they provided the genetics that are the foundation for almost all of our reblooming modern roses. We date it to 1793, but it was known and grown in China way, way before then. Then we have Roulettii. This is also known as Pompon de Paris, and it is a perfect miniature version of Old Blush with flowers that are only a little bit over an inch in diameter. It also comes in a climbing version, which is a once bloomer. The dwarf shrub is almost perpetual bloom, where the climbing version only blooms in the spring with the odd flower here and there in late summer, early fall. There is I saw something listed as Roulettii on the table at the Virginia Rose Show in Richmond one year, many years ago, and I took one look at it and I knew that it was not Roulettii, but I wasn't going to let on. There was absolutely wrong. So keep an eye out if you like something. If you like this, you may get the wrong one. Archduke Charles shows here the charming tendency of pink China roses. Its petals darken to red as the flowers age. It is a spectacle to see a large Archduke Charles shrub with pink and red flowers on it at the exact same time. DNA analysis shows that this rose is a sport of Old Blush. There are so many sports of Old Blush out there. God bless DNA comparisons. Here we have Duché. Duché is one of the few white China roses. It's a smallish shrub, very well behaved, great in the garden, very disease resistant, so much so that was on the very first list of Earthkind roses when they first started the program. Now, red China roses have my heart, and I have a number of them. Louis Philippe is the one that's most often grown in modern gardens. It took decades for hybridizers to accurately reproduce this clear red color that these roses from Asia have exhibited from centuries. Here we have Metabolus, another one of the color-changing Chinas. You might also hear this rose called the butterfly rose. Imagine a shrub, and these are very large shrubs. In warmer climates than ours, Metabolus can get to be the size of a Volkswagen. Here, probably 5 feet is about all that it can do. A shrub full of these 5-petaled flowers, which darken with age, has been compared to a flock of butterflies. There's also a yellow sport of Metabolus that was discovered in Bermuda. The flowers on that one start out a pale, clear yellow, and they fade to orange. It never gets the characteristic dark pink, light red that this Metabolus does. Now we have tea roses. Like the China roses, they are disease resistant. They may be winter tender, but they do not mind heat and humidity at all. And they tend to thrive here in our hot, humid summers as long as they have adequate water. And even if they don't have adequate water, they will still be fine. Madame Antoine Marie. When I had my nursery, I used to sell a lot of her because she's kind of the gateway drug to some old garden roses because the buds and the flower form when it's first opening is very familiar to modern rose growers. It grows up, it opens into kind of a muddled form that is perfectly appropriate for tea roses. It's a relatively small plant. 4x4 is about all that it will do and incredibly disease resistant. And this one survives our winters just fine. Duchesse de Brabant is one of the more popular ones. And I will admit, I took this photo in May at Hollywood Cemetery, and it is a plant that got absolutely no care whatsoever throughout the year, and it still looked that good when it started blooming. This is another small one, probably 4x4 is what it will do. Now, I have been told that the flowers are fragrant and smell of raspberries, but there's also a genetic component as to whether you can detect the scent of tea roses. And I do not have that gene apparently because I cannot smell them. Madame Lombard has amazing shaded flowers and this pale green foliage. She's a big girl, but she's upright. I grow one in my garden right now that is 7 feet tall, but it's only about 4 feet wide. And I limit up so that you can see underneath of it, also so the deer can't reach the top of it. It's a great, great one, and it's readily available. Here we have white maman cochet, another one that modern rose growers would look at this and go, "Hey, I can do this," because that opening flower form is very, very familiar to them. This is a big plant. It will easily go 6 by 6, and it'll bloom like this all summer long. To prove just how tough these roses are, I took the I told you that I took the photo of Duchesse de Brabant, but also Madame Lombard, White Maman Cochet, and this Safrano were taken at Hollywood Cemetery during the summer bloom, and they do just fine. Hollywood it's warmer than we are. By their roses are usually 2 weeks ahead of mine, and that's about a week ahead of the ones in the rest of the city. But Safrano is about the size of Madame Lombard, easily 6, 7 feet high, very, very graceful, and blooms all throughout the growing season. Then we get to the modern hybrids. Now, we've already said that people in the 18th century who had the means, the Asian roses came in, and they were excited about it. The hybridizers got their hands on them to see if they could get ones that bloomed as well as roses that had the characteristics of the old garden roses that they were familiar with the scent and the color and the number of petals, but with the bloom habit of the Asian roses. It took over a century for that to finally happen. This is a class that the American Rose Society does not recognize, but in the old garden rose world, and I'm a trustee for the Heritage Rose Foundation, we recognize the term hybrid China. So these were the intermediate generations of crosses between the old European roses and the China roses that were ever blooming. And they're really, once you know what you're looking for, they're really, really easy to spot. The foliage often looks like the Gallicas or the centifolias, but the canes are long and they're slender, and often the new growth is kind of red like you would expect on a modern rose. Most of the hybrid Chinas are a mystery because they weren't particularly documented well, and I have found numerous ones surviving in cemeteries that often without care. This is Shaler's Provence, and this is the one that I have found more often than any other. I believe it's 8 times at this point between cemeteries, the side of the road, and old home sites. It's believed to be the first commercially available hybrid China rose. It is the first once blooming rose in my garden to bloom, and often the very last one to finish. I'll get a full 4 weeks out of this or more. It's tall, it's graceful. There are very few prickles on it. You can train it as a small climber or grow it self-supporting. I love this rose, and I can't be objective about it. It's one of my favorites. Then we have the Bishop. This is one that there are 4 roses out there distinctly different from each other that are known as the Bishop. But it is obviously has some China in its ancestry and probably Gallica. That's a very accurate representation of the color with the warm hot pink in the middle, and it fades to a violet and then to a gray violet, and it is incredibly fragrant. One of the things about the bishop, I often had people come to the nursery and they wanted something that was fragrant, disease resistant, ever blooming, didn't get too big. And I would say, would you like to go smell the bishop? And we'd go into the garden, they would smell this rose, they would look at the habit, and I always sold out of the bishop every single year. Here we have Hippolyte. If you look at the flower on that, it's very similar to what the centifolias look like with so many petals. It is tall and graceful, and I grow mine as an arching shrub, incredibly fragrant with that warm burgundy. If you're available for open garden, come meet it. I'll introduce you to it in person. Here we have Old Homestead. It's another one that has the same flower form with the colors that blues as it ages. This is one that is often found at old places in California. Here we have Tidewater Trail. This is one of my own foundlings, and I named it Tidewater Trail because that's where I found it on Route 2, just south of Fredericksburg, and the road's called Tidewater Trail. It was growing beside a porch of an old house. So it's one of the few rose Russells where I've left my car running because I was right underneath of a no trespassing sign. I took cuttings, and it's a good thing that I did because the old house and the rose were destroyed a few years later. What's interesting about this one is that I've compared flowers of this with some other people that I know who have collected roses, and this exact rose has been known to grow in Texas, New Jersey, New York, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and it is in the garden of Tufton Farm at Monticello that I can't find the label on it, so I will have to ask them where they got that one. But it's said extraordinarily fragrant, like every one of the others in this class. Here we have the noisettes. This is the only class of rose that was developed in America. And I don't know if it was done on purpose, but with the other roses that they were trying to get repeat bloomers, they crossed a once bloomer with a repeat bloomer and then crossed into it over successive generations. Well, John Champneys in Charleston crossed Rosa moscata, which is the old musk rose that blooms throughout the summer into fall, with Old Blush that is almost continuously blooming. So it was either a lucky accident or a stroke of genius to cross two repeat blooming roses. These are upright or arching shrubs, can be used as climbers. The flowers are incredibly fragrant, and the fragrance wafts on the breeze. Many mystery noisettes have been found in cemeteries and old home sites, and attempts to identify them with known noisette cultivars are really frustrating because often these could be seedlings. I have had seedlings emerge in my own garden. So most of the ones that you find that are unknown will just be labeled with a study name, and that will follow them along through commerce. Here we have the one that started it all, Champneys Pink Cluster. It's about 5 to 6 feet tall, self-supporting. It can get some black spot here. I do use fungicide on this one, otherwise it will lose its leaves. But it's incredibly fragrant. I can't smell many roses, and I can smell this one. We have Nasturana. I included this one because it is available in the trade, and it's a very, very different flower form with the semi-double. And this is probably one of the only photos that I've taken of Nasturana that doesn't have an insect in it. It's just the flower form and the stamens are just a beacon for pollinators. We have Setzer's Noisette. This was named for the family that supposedly carried this one. If the story is true, and I've not been able to prove it, Setzer's Noisette made the migration west from Virginia to California, and it was given to one of the nurseries in California who has perpetuated it and kept it in commerce. I bought it because of the Virginia connection. Here we have Manetti. This is a weird noisette because it only blooms once. And I included this because if you spend much time out there in the wild, you'll find Manetti. And the reason is it used to be the absolute most popular or most widely used rootstock until Dr. Huey came along. So almost exclusively, if you find Manetti growing in a garden, chances are that someone planted a different cultivar and Manetti emerged and took over, just like Dr. Huey does today. Hybridizers got their hands on the noisettes, and they put some tea rose in there to make some larger flowers, different colors. And many of the tea noisettes, as they're called, are climbers. And Alistair Stella Gray is a particularly nice one. Then we have Crepuscule. It's one of the more popular climbing noisettes. The color and its hardiness just absolutely cannot be beat. I miss this one desperately. I grew it for a lot of years and I lost it to rosette disease a few years ago. We have Portland roses. Now, this is a relatively small class, only about 20 roses in there. And these were developed by crossing autumn damask with some other roses in the classes. So this is unusual because they didn't cross it with the Chinas or the teas. They're smaller shrubs, rarely exceeding 4 feet, repeat blooming and very, very, very fragrant. Here's the one that most people know. This is Rose de Recht. It is a found rose, supposedly found in Turkey, I believe it was, Turkey or Syria or Afghanistan, before 1900. We don't know what its original origins are, but it is a wonderful little landscape shrub that blooms and that's incredibly, incredibly fragrant. Here we have Portland from Glendora. This was in that first order of old garden roses that I bought when I bought Celeste. This one, it's about 5 feet high, very, very fragrant, blooms a lot. And if you notice at the bottom left, you can see it's starting to get a little bit of black spot. It does black spot, but I don't spray this one. I just let it do its thing. Here we have Sidonia, almost exactly the same habit and the exact same flower form as Portland from Glendora. I have had a number of different conversations with other rose people thinking that possibly we know the provenance of Sidonia. We do not know the provenance of Portland from Glendora. It's a rose that's been found at old house sites and cemeteries fairly often, especially in the West. And there's speculation that they may be sister seedlings from the same hybridizer because they are just so similar. I grow them both and I love them both. Here we have indigo. It's a weird little freak in the Portland group. It grows like a gallica. It's no more than 2 feet tall. It spreads like a forest fire, suckering to the 4 winds. And I don't mind one bit because it blooms all year long. It is exactly what you see there, and mostly the gray, blue, purple with the little bit of magenta in it. Very, very fragrant. And unless you cut them, you practically have to get on your knees in order to smell them. And it's always interesting to see where it spreads in my garden because it doesn't form a real thicket, but it absolutely does sucker and move. And I control mine by giving them away to people. I'll just dig them, pot them, and give them away. Then we have the bourbon roses. These were created in South Asia by crossing the Rosa chinensis and the damasks. The bourbons we know today are from repeated crosses of China's and the European roses. They are repeat flowering and fragrant, small to medium shrubs, or they can be long cane shrubs or train them as small climbers. Here we have Souvenir de la Malmaison, which is a relatively small shrub. It is the one that most people know. Very, very, very fragrant. Nice little shrub with shiny foliage, very disease resistant, blooms a lot. But for whatever reason, I don't like it as well. There's a semi-double sport of this one, Souvenir de St. Anne's, which I like a whole lot more. Same shrub form, same color, just a slightly different flower form. And here we have Madame Isaac Perrier, which you often see at rose shows. She is a lanky girl, not particularly thorny, and I find that she's best on a tripod or on a small trellis to show her off to full advantage. Variegata di Bologna. This one always practically stops traffic during my open garden because each of the flowers looks like this, and the stripe pattern on each of them is completely different. It's a freak in the bourbon world because it exclusively blooms in the spring. It is a sport of an unknown rose, and if you grow it long enough, chances are you'll end up with a reversion. And my plant has has canes that have these striped flowers on them, and they also have the canes with the reversion, which is the solid dark red, just like the stripes in this are. And then we have Zephy. She's been popular since 1868, and so many people I know grow her, and with very, very good reason. Incredibly fragrant. Some forms bloom more than others. Mine was one that would bloom mostly in the spring and then moderately in the fall. It is another rose that I miss because I lost it to rose rosette disease about 5 years ago. Here we have Zephy's sports sister, Kathleen Harrop. For whatever reason, this rose performs a lot better for me than Zephy did. Exactly the same form, exactly the same habit, just the flowers are a slightly different color. And a few years ago, I had a couple of flowers that looked as if they were going to try to revert to Zephyrine Drouin with the warm dark pink. So that was kind of interesting to find. Then we have hybrid perpetuals. They were the darling of the rose world in the second half of the 19th century. These are tall, upright plants. Some of them could be trained as climbers. We're starting to get a lot more susceptibility to fungal diseases at this point, and they're repeat flowering, not perpetual like the name suggests. Most bloom very, very well in the spring and then moderately for the rest of the year, and most of them are very, very fragrant. Here we have Frau Karl Druschke. For decades, Frau Karl Druschke was how they measured white roses. It was thought to be the absolute perfect white rose. The only flaw that I've ever read in any of the literature is that it has no fragrance whatsoever. This plant, the one that I grow here, came from Hollywood Cemetery. There used to be 3 of them growing there, but they've disappeared. This is a moderately lanky shrub, and it blooms really, really well. If it smelled, she'd be perfect. And then we get to the exact opposite end of the scale, we have John Hopper. My friend Rick Brown said that John Hopper was the absolute most fragrant rose in his garden. Um, it's 6 feet tall and blooms like crazy in the spring and then moderately throughout the rest of the year. And the fragrance will absolutely knock you over. Then we have Marquesa Bocello, which has a completely different habit than the others. Um, this one wants to be a little shorter, 4 to 5 feet high, matte foliage, just like the rest of them, incredibly fragrant. Actually, when I do propagation workshops, one of the roses that the people can choose is Marquesa Bocello because it roots very, very easily from cuttings. And here we have Paul Néron. These flowers are absolutely enormous. Your outstretched hand on a spring bloom on a well-grown plant is just about the right size to hold one of these flowers. Tall and upright, very, very, very fragrant. We have Reine de Violette. It's another one that probably belongs in a different class because the habit is it's a relatively smallish plant, but it wants to grow up and then arch over, which is great because that causes more flowers as it arches over and goes in at an angle. This is one of the first roses to bloom in my garden every spring, and it's always very welcome when it comes because the fragrance, it finally there are roses after a long cold winter. As I talked about earlier, there's the hard line between the era of old garden roses and that of modern roses. It's 1867. This is La France, the rose that they assigned as the first hybrid tea rose. It was recognized as something new and different, and it was different enough to warrant creation of a new class for it and those like it that came after. This marked the beginning of the era of modern roses with their new and different forms and habits, and the rose world has never been the same since. And there we have the open garden, and that rose, that is Cardinal de Richelieu. It is classed as a Gallica, but I would put money on the fact that it's a hybrid China just because of its habit, and that is its true grape purple color. I love it. I guess I'm done.
Well, I have a comment.
Yes. Hi, Holly.
Hi. Well, so I remember Leonie Bell, and she actually stayed at my house and just was always looking at roses and teaching me about a lot of different things, including her all-time favorite rose, which I have been growing ever since because it's so low maintenance and so beautiful. And it's Marie Pavier.
Oh, yes, 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 absolutely. And I concur with all of those observations. And I am so jealous because she had passed by the time I got into the old rose world.
Yeah, I mean, and she could be tough, as you know. And, I think I remember the first time she came in the National Herb Garden, Rose Garden, she sort of had this cane and she was going, that's not labeled right. That's not labeled right. And I wasn't confident about it, but we had a botanist and I said, well, we're working on it, but we think we're doing, it doesn't, you know, we all came to agreement in the end, but she was opinionated, but I respected her a lot.
See, I have heard this because one of my mentors was Doug Seidel,
Yeah.
and she was his mentor. So
Oh,
I guess two generations removed.
yeah, yeah. So I'm definitely going to come to your open house if I can. I can't wait to see your roses.
Well, and also for everybody else that's here, Open Garden is the day when I prepare for the public to come. Anybody can just walk in, but garden friends are welcome all the time. You just got to get hold of me and say, "Hey, are you going to be around?" Actually,
I didn't-
John from Potomac Rose Society did that last year because he said he couldn't come for Open Garden because he was going on a rose tour. And I said, okay, well, if you're going on a rose tour, you can come a day early. So it's always wonderful when I get to do it one-on-one with people.
Connie, someone asked if you can go back a slide so the open garden information is up. And
There you
then I was curious about a couple things, but Barkley asked, what spray do you use for fungal prevention?
go. It's either propiconazole or tebuconazole, depending on what I have on the shelf. It's the same mode of action. Um, It's systemic and it's labeled for application every 2 weeks. So on the roses that need fungicide, they get sprayed every other Monday, at least in the beginning of the year when I'm motivated to do it. Toward the end of the year, there's too many prerequisites. So it's like, oh, they have to be well watered. It can't be too hot. It can't be this. And after a while, I'm just making apologies.
Yeah. What do you do about thrips?
Absolutely nothing. That's where it comes down to. My friend Rick used to trap them in what did he use? He used some sort of sticky something on a blue Solo cup on a tomato steak. That's what he did to them. But I don't apply any insecticides at all in the garden. I tell everybody no insecticides, no exceptions. So if I
And
can't,
you don't do any IPM?
that is my IPM actually.
Okay.
So it's cultural. I pick off and trap Japanese beetles. I squash rose slugs, but after that, no. I've got 500 roses. I can't put too much effort into one individual one.
Yeah. What you didn't talk about the found roses of Bermuda. Is
Okay.
it's not a class, is it? Or how does that fall in?
Bermuda is a really unique situation because it was a major stopover point in the trade route across the Atlantic. And they speculate that the unique roses that are there are ones that were brought on the trade ships. So many of them don't have true cultivar names. They're known by study names. But what's great about Bermuda is the Bermuda Rose Society is incredibly active and they really respect the roses and they promote them through the island. Um, every Bermuda Rose Society person that I met while I was there has a home propagation area. They propagate, they have plant sales, and in one of my programs, I have a photo. They don't do a rose show, they do a display. And one of the things in their display is overwhelming with, single flowers in vases. And it's just labeled roses that grow well in Bermuda.
I love that.
Yeah, the thing about the yellow mutabolus, I actually met the lady who found that in her garden.
Oh,
Um, it was on an offshoot on the bottom of one of the bottom canes, and she was elderly, and someone was helping her in her garden and said, Miss Jenny, look what I think we have a sport here.
that is the
We
best
do.
way to find it.
Yeah,
Do you
straight
grow?
from the person who found it.
That's perfect.
Hmm.
Do you grow Hebe's lip? Or
No,
maybe I make,
I've never grown that one.
okay, maybe I'm mispronouncing it. It's
No, that's how I
Hebe.
do it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm growing it. It's just very slow growing, but it's very healthy. So I was just curious about that one.
Okay,
Um,
nice.
Yeah,
Nice. I'll have to look at it next time I'm at your house.
that'd be great. I also grow the Moser pink striped that I got from Malcolm Manners. Do you have that one? I know
What
you
is
didn't
it?
like it. It's called Moser pink striped.
I've heard of it. I don't have it.
Okay. Well, I got it from Malcolm and you can get it from that Florida nursery,
Yeah.
whatever it's called. But yeah,
I'll put in another plug. The Heritage Rose Foundation conference is in New York City this year. We're going to be doing the New York Heritage Rose District, the Brooklyn Botanical, and one of the others, and a couple of tours of estates. It's in June, and I, off the top of my head, should have prepared, and I should know the dates, but I don't. But it's on the Heritage Rose Foundation website, and I just got an email from one of the other board members said that there's still room if anybody wants to go.
it's great.
Oh, I know. I'm excited to. I have heard so much about what Stephen Scaniello and Malcolm have done in New York with the Heritage Rose District. Um, I was supposed to go in March of 2020, so we kind of know what happened with that. That trip got canceled.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm excited to finally see it for myself.
Okay.
Connie, this is
Yeah.
Neil Ray calling or speaking.
Hey,
I'm very much an ignorant rose grower, and my question will probably reflect that. But I have been kind of raised to believe that modern hybrid teas were extremely delicate, susceptible things, and yet I believe you said that some of the early hybrid teas were pretty tough and durable. So I'm a little bit confused.
my front garden is a really good example of this. It is absolutely a mixed bag. It started out as 80 classic hybrid teas growing on their own roots. Um, and they started to weed themselves out. Some were just totally unsuited to growing in our climate. I believe they probably would be happier in Southern California. Others absolutely thrive. But one of the things to remember about when the early hybrid teas were created, a finished rose was a budded rose. End of story. These roses were never meant to grow on their own roots. So I'm practicing budding onto multiflora, and I'll see later how much success I get and what difference it is between growing on their own roots and growing on rootstock. But it's absolutely a mixed bag, and visiting gardens is the best way to find that out, honestly, because you can see, oh, this one's doing really well, and then other times it's like, oh, you poor little thing, what's wrong with you?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
A question, do you find that the heritage roses are as susceptible to rosette disease as some of the more some of the newer roses?
The research right now is that what they're trying to do is identify any kind of characteristics that can lead to resistance.
Okay.
And it's mainly aimed toward the nursery trade right now for new cultivars. In my experience, and from talking to Dr. Wyndham, who's retired from University of Tennessee, who was one of the major researchers for that, any rose is more susceptible.
Okay.
It really is. All that virus needs is live rose tissue.
Okay.
So we see it more in knockouts and feral stands of multiflora, but that's just because there's more of that.
Right.
It could fall on your prized heritage rose, and all of the ones that I have lost have been spread across all classes, climbers, miniatures. I lost 4 last year, which is more than I have lost in the last few years. Now that it's spring, I'm going to go through the adjoining properties because we're fairly open here and see if there's an infected rose somewhere in the trees.
I found that that rose rosette attacks the roses that are under stress. So if I transplant one, then that one tends to get it. If I, put in some new infrastructure like a path next to one where I might have damaged the roots, it should recover, but it will be attacked by rose rosette if it's around, if the aphid mites are. I lost a gay Hammond, which is just a monster of a rose, and nobody should use one. But when I built a wall, I cut into those roots, and it did succumb to rose rosette.
And you changed the air patterns too. So you had two contributing factors.
Exactly.
Yep. No, I
But the
lost.
beneficials will help with that. Anything that you do to control the mites will help with preventing rose rosette.
Yeah, I lost Glendale last year, and that was one of my absolute favorite roses. The ones that you just stand by it and go, "Are you blooming yet? Are you blooming yet?" And it was enormous. But fortunately, I lost it last fall. Last spring, I shared cuttings of it, and the cuttings are healthy. And he says he'll give me a plant back. So it's not available in the trade anymore. Nobody sells it.
And Barkley asked if you have any orange roses. I grow Lady of Shalott, but I didn't know if you knew of other, like maybe even more orange roses.
Lady of Shalott is really, really good. Crepuscule, incredible, bright, bright, bright orange. But orange is another one that came in kind of late. Not orange, but I love Pearl d'Or.
Me too.
Absolutely love Pearl d'Or. That's another one that it's planted next to the house so that I can see it every time I go outside. And that's orangey apricot. Can we kind of fudge that a little?
Yeah, if you asked about apricot roses, I'd have a longer list.
Yeah.
But orange is more of a problem for me
I'll have
to.
to think on that. It's not I can get hold of him if I come up with something. But orange is a tough one.
Yeah.
I used to grow one that didn't particularly care for this climate. I got it at the Sacramento Cemetery Rose Sale years and years ago. It was called the Car Wash Rose. And it was shaded orange. It was a once bloomer, and it actually was collected outside of a car wash. And it never quite recovered from winter each year. And then one year it just didn't come back. And I was really sad about that.
Connie, I got Sway May Wren from Malcolm Manors too, back in 2016 or 17 when I was at your home.
Okay.
Do you grow Sway May Wren?
It doesn't sound familiar.
Okay. I just have a lot of trouble with it, so I was looking for tips.
Yeah, see, I tend to stick with the ones that I have trouble with because what my garden looks like is a lot less important than what I'm preserving here. Even if I can't grow it well, there have been times when people who could grow it that were in regions that could grow it better had asked about plants, and I gladly either hand over cuttings or often the plants are small and I hand them straight over to them so they can be preserved somewhere else.
Yeah, because it has a beautiful bloom. It just loses all of its leaves from black spot, and you need some leaves. So,
Oh, that's sad.
but the blossoms are so gorgeous. It's hard to say,
And see, imagine how amazing it would be if it didn't get black spot and it could put its energy into flowering and growing instead of continually replenishing its food supply.
Yeah, but I don't treat the fungal
I know that's
diseases.
the way I think of it, and I'm with you. I don't go to I unless it's something that I absolutely adore that is nearly extinct. I don't go to great lengths.
Yeah. You've got many, many thanks in the chat.
Okay, cool.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Let's see.